Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I was sitting on the couch in my childhood home, the place where I'd spent so many years trying to fit in and get the approval of my family. Now, it felt more like a courtroom, with a jury of my closest relatives surrounding me, each ready to pass judgment. My name's Victoria. I'm 29 years old. I live in a small apartment in downtown Denver, far away from this place. For years, I felt like the disappointment of my family, the one who couldn't get it right no matter what. And today, the weight of their disappointment was suffocating. My father, Robert, sat at the head of the group, his posture as stiff as the suit he wore. A successful insurance executive, Robert always knew how to make a statement. Even now, his sharp gaze felt like it could cut through me. Victoria, he began, his voice steady and precise. You've made some questionable choices, dropping out of law school, rejecting the job offer at my firm, and now, this. A job from home that, what, doesn't even have a clear title? I've been patient, but enough is enough. The words stung, but I held my ground, my hands rested calmly in my lap, though my heart was racing. I'm not sure I understand what you're so upset about, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. I'm happy. I'm doing well. Just because it doesn't fit your idea of success doesn't mean I'm failing. Happy? My younger brother, Marcus, chimed in, his arms crossed over his chest. Marcus had it all. The perfect career, the perfect family, the perfect life. He worked at Dad's insurance company, and to them, he was the golden child. You've turned down every opportunity you've had. You turned your back on Dad's company, and now you're working, what? Some online thing that sounds like a scam. How is that success? His words felt like a punch in the gut. I wasn't the first choice in the family, and I hadn't been for years. Marcus, with his picture-perfect life, was their pride and joy. My mother, Patricia, sat quietly next to him, wringing her hands in her lap. She wasn't saying much, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Soft, but still, concern. Sweetheart, she finally spoke, her voice gentle. I just want you to be happy, but you've always been so different from us. I don't understand this path you've chosen, and I'm worried it's not sustainable. Claire, my younger sister, who worked at a marketing firm thanks to family connections, barely looked up from her phone. Her words, when they came, were laced with sarcasm. Honestly, it's embarrassing. You could be so much more. Instead, you're wasting your potential on something that looks, well, like a joke. The judgment hung in the air like thick smoke. I could feel it suffocating me, but I refused to let them see me crack. I had chosen this path because it made me happy. I didn't need to follow the rules they'd laid out for me. I'm not embarrassed by my life, I said, my voice firm. I'm content, and I know that's hard for you to understand, but that's where I'm at. I'm not going to change just to fit into your box. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. My father's eyes narrowed, his mouth tightening into a thin line. You've made your choice, he said slowly, leaning forward, his tone hardening. But if you're not going to take things seriously, then we're done. No more support from me. You'll figure it out on your own. The words hit me like a slap, but I wasn't about to break. This was my moment, my time to finally stand up for myself, to show them I was capable of making my own choices, even if they didn't understand them. I already am figuring it out, I said quietly, and I'm not asking for your approval anymore. With that, I stood up, ready to walk away from the suffocating air of judgment and into a future that was mine to define. My family didn't get it, but they would. They'd just have to accept it. The silence in the room thickened after my father's ultimatum. His voice, cold and stern, hung in the air like a heavy weight. I've been more than patient with you, Victoria, but this is getting out of hand. He paused, looking around at my mother and the others as if seeking support. You need to do something respectable. I'm not asking you to change your entire life, but you need to start living in the real world. Marcus leaned forward, his face filled with that same disappointment. You don't understand, do you? He said, his tone hard but trying to remain calm. You could be doing so much more, but instead you're stuck in some online job. It's like you're avoiding success on purpose. Claire's voice, though quieter, carried a venomous edge. If you'd just listen to Dad and get a real job at Patterson and Associates, maybe you'd finally have a career that means something. But instead, you're living in some fantasy. I could feel the pressure rising in my chest, But I refused to let it show. Their expectations had been suffocating me for years. They wanted me to fit their mold, corporate, successful, traditional, but that wasn't who I was anymore. Let me be clear, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. I'm not going to be your idea of successful just to fit into your mold. I'm doing just fine on my own. Robert's face tightened. You're on your own now, Victoria. No more financial help, no more leniency. If you won't even consider a job at the firm, you'll need to start supporting yourself entirely. My mother, her voice soft but filled with concern, spoke up. Maybe you should at least consider a job interview, sweetheart. It could help get you on the right path. I shook my head, resolute. I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone to tell me how to live my life. Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down, the screen showing a number I didn't recognize. I didn't expect much, but I answered anyway, partly out of habit. Hello? Is this Victoria Harper? A voice asked, smooth and professional. Yes, this is she. Victoria, this is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine. I'm calling because we're doing a feature on the youngest self-made billionaires, and we'd love to feature you on our cover. The room froze. My father's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Marcus and Claire exchanged confused glances, and my mother's face was full of shock. Excuse me? I asked, my heart skipping a beat. You've been recommended to us for your work in the tech industry, Jennifer continued, oblivious to the shocked silence in the room. We'd like to talk more about your company and the groundbreaking work you're doing. It's truly remarkable. I could hear the disbelief in my family's quiet gasps behind me. I smiled, though it was a little bittersweet. I'd be happy to talk. The phone call continued as Jennifer and I worked out the details for the interview. But as I spoke, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my family's expectations slowly unraveling behind me. When I hung up, I turned to face them all. My father, still struggling to process the words he'd just heard, opened his mouth but faltered. You're a billionaire? He asked, as if trying to confirm what had just happened. I nodded, my voice steady. I've been building a company for the last 5 years. It's called Quantum Dynamics, and we specialize in AI and algorithm development. We've had contracts with major tech firms and financial institutions. My company is valued at $3.2 billion now. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the shock on their faces, their perceptions of me shifting, slowly but undeniably. I'm sorry, Robert's voice trailed off, as if trying to process this new reality. I had no idea. Marcus, still staring at me with wide eyes, shook his head. Wait, so you've been successful all this time, and we had no idea? I nodded again. Yes, but it wasn't something I felt I needed to share. You've all had your own expectations of me, and I had to prove I could do this on my own, without any of you believing in me. Claire, who had been so quick to judge, was speechless. Her eyes flicked between me and the others, her mouth opening and closing in shock. It's a lot to take in, I said quietly, taking a deep breath. But this is my life, and I'm happy with it. I'm not interested in a job at Patterson and Associates, and I'm not going to pretend I am. I'm doing what works for me. The family's reaction was still one of disbelief, but I could see the wheels turning, as if they were starting to understand a little more about me and my journey. For the first time, I felt like I was being seen, not as the black sheep or the failure, but as someone who had built something on her own terms. I'd done it, and now they were starting to see it too. The tension in the room was palpable as I wrapped up the call with Jennifer Walsh from Forbes. I had just told the magazine about my company, Quantum Dynamics, and how we were pioneering breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. The weight of my family's expectations still loomed over me. But now, there was a shift. They were no longer sure of their judgment. Jennifer had confirmed that I'd be the cover story for their next issue, The Youngest Self-Made Billionaire. The conversation had been brief, but to the point. As soon as I hung up, the silence in the room was deafening. My family was still processing the information, their expressions a mix of disbelief and confusion. Robert, who had been the most vocal about my fantasy career, was the first to speak, but his words were tentative, unsure. I don't understand, he said, shaking his head slowly. I mean, you've been doing this all along and we had no idea. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. Yes, Quantum Dynamics has been around for 5 years now. We specialize in AI and algorithms. We're working with major tech firms and financial institutions. Our latest valuation? $3.2 billion. 3.2 billion? Marcus, my younger brother, repeated, his eyes wide. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by genuine shock. But you've been doing this while we've been… What? Thinking you were just wasting time? I met his gaze, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. That's exactly it, Marcus. You all thought I was wasting my potential because it didn't look like the path you wanted for me. Claire, who had been silent up until now, looked at me with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. She had always dismissed my choices, especially when it came to my career. So, what exactly do you do? She asked, her voice almost a mockery, but with a hint of genuine interest beneath the surface. I mean, AI sounds like something from a sci-fi movie. I felt a small smirk tug at the corner of my lips. AI and algorithms aren't just for movies anymore, Claire. We're developing systems that can predict financial trends, optimize supply chains, and automate processes that save companies millions. My company is not some fantasy. We're changing industries. We're a real company, and it's worth billions. My mother, Patricia, who had been quiet for the most part, now leaned forward, her face full of concern. Victoria, why didn't you tell us any of this? You're clearly successful. But why stay in that tiny apartment? Why drive that old car if you're a billionaire? I had expected this. The questioning of my modest lifestyle, the superficial judgments that came from a family obsessed with appearances. I don't need a fancy apartment or a new car to prove I'm successful, Mom. I value substance over status. I don't need to flaunt my wealth to feel good about what I've built. Marcus, still processing the information, let out a deep breath. I had no idea, he said, shaking his head. I guess I always thought you were just struggling, trying to figure it out. And now you're a billionaire? Why didn't you ever tell us? I didn't need you to know, I said softly. I didn't need your approval to keep going. I've always had to prove myself, but I never asked for help. I did it on my own because I knew if I waited for you to see me as successful, I'd still be waiting. The room was quiet again. They were processing it, trying to piece together how they had missed the truth for so long, but I could see the respect starting to form in their eyes, even if they didn't fully understand it. Robert cleared his throat. So, you really did it. You've built something huge. Yes, I said, my voice unwavering. I did, and I'm proud of it. Claire, who had been the most vocal in her criticisms, was now oddly quiet, but the wheels were turning in her head. Finally, she spoke. I want to learn more about what you do, Vic. I mean, AI, that's kind of amazing. Can you teach me about it? Her words were tentative, almost hesitant, but there was no mistaking the curiosity in her voice. It was a start. As for my parents, their views were changing slowly, but I could see the shift. My father's once rigid expectations of me were now replaced with an unspoken humility. He was starting to grasp that I hadn't been the failure he thought I was. I guess I owe you an apology, Victoria, he said, looking at me with a sincerity I hadn't expected. I misjudged you. I didn't understand what you were doing, but maybe I was wrong. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was the start of something new. They were beginning to see me for who I really was, someone who didn't need to fit their mold to succeed. And that, in itself, was a victory. The tension had not fully dissipated from the room after I revealed the truth about my success. My father, Robert, who had been the loudest in his criticisms, sat silently now, looking down at his hands. Marcus, still wide-eyed, couldn't seem to process it all. My mother, Patricia, had a soft, puzzled expression, as though she were trying to understand how she had missed the signs all along. And Claire, the one who had so casually dismissed me as a failure, seemed less sure of herself than ever before. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could feel the weight of their realizations sinking in. The assumptions they'd clung to about me, about my life, my choices, were crumbling before their eyes. It was Robert who broke the silence, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I don't know what to say, Victoria, he began. I guess I've misjudged you. I thought you were just throwing away your potential, but you've done something big, something real. I blinked, surprised at his admission. My father, the man who had built an empire from the ground up, had always had a certain pride in his ability to call the shots. To see him falter, to admit his error, was jarring. You didn't get it, did you? I said softly. All this time, you didn't believe in me. You didn't see the work I was putting in, the nights I stayed up, the sacrifices I made. You only saw what you wanted to see, your idea of success, but I never fit into that. He nodded slowly, the weight of my words hitting him harder than I expected. I was wrong, he muttered, almost as if speaking to himself. I should have listened. Patricia, who had remained quiet throughout most of this, placed a hand on his arm, her voice filled with concern. I'm just so sorry, Victoria. We always thought you needed to follow a traditional path to be happy, to be successful. We never really understood what you were doing, and we should have. But we were so focused on what we thought was best for you. I swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. You didn't understand me. You never did. You never took the time to ask, to see what I wanted. It was always about what you thought was right, and when I didn't fit, I became the disappointment. Marcus, who had been silent for most of this conversation, looked at me, his brow furrowed. Honestly, I had no idea. He ran a hand through his hair. I mean, I guess I just assumed you were struggling. I didn't even know you were working on something like this. He gestured vaguely, his voice filled with both awe and confusion. How did we miss it? I thought you were just drifting. I shook my head. Because you didn't look. You didn't see that I was working, that I was pushing myself to build something, to prove I didn't need your approval. Claire, who had been fidgeting with her phone, looked up from the screen, her eyes full of surprise. I didn't know, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. I mean, I thought you were just wasting time, Vic. I didn't get it. She looked up at me, her expression shifting from defensiveness to something else. Admiration, maybe? I didn't realize what you were capable of. It's impressive, what you've done. I want to know more. About AI. About everything. Her words caught me off guard. Claire had always been the first to sneer, the first to make dismissive comments about my life choices. But now, she seemed genuinely curious. I'll teach you, I said, my voice softening. I'll show you what I've learned. It's not as complicated as it seems, once you start understanding it, but it's all about seeing things differently. It's about finding your own way to succeed, even when no one believes in you. Patricia smiled warmly at me, a look of genuine pride in her eyes. You were always so determined, she said softly. We should have recognized that sooner. I'm proud of you, Victoria. I don't think we ever said that enough. My father nodded again, his gaze now filled with respect. I may not understand all the technical stuff you're doing, but I can see the results, and that's what matters. I felt a quiet weight lift from my chest, though a part of me couldn't fully let go of the years of misunderstanding. It's been a long road, I said, more to myself than anyone else, but I've learned a lot on my own. I've had to. There was a quiet pause before Robert spoke again, his voice filled with a new humility. We've been blind, Victoria. I see that now, and I'm sorry. We thought we knew what was best, but we should have let you find your own way. I nodded, my heart finally starting to heal from years of silence and skepticism. Maybe it's time we all start seeing each other differently, I said, looking around at each of them. We're not going to change overnight, but I'm willing to start over, as long as you're willing to do the same. Marcus gave me a sheepish smile. I think I can manage that, he said, his voice lighter now. For the first time, I saw a real shift in their eyes. Not judgment, not skepticism, but respect. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't instant, but it was something. I had finally shown them who I really was, and they were starting to see it too. The phone call with Jennifer from Forbes had barely ended before the messages from my family started flooding in. I hadn't expected an outpouring of support, but I hadn't anticipated the kind of shift I was witnessing either. The family that once saw me as a lost cause, a waste of potential, now seemed curious. It was strange, but not unwelcome. The first text came from Marcus, just minutes after I hung up with Jennifer. Marcus, I'm in shock. Can you tell me more about what you've been doing? I couldn't help but smile as I read it. I had spent so many years trying to prove myself to him, trying to show him that I wasn't the screw-up they all assumed I was. And now, here he was, asking questions, wanting to understand. Then there was Claire, who had always been the most dismissive of my lifestyle. Claire, I don't know much about AI, but I want to learn. Could you explain it to me sometime? I blinked at the message, stunned. Claire, asking me to teach her something? It was the first time she'd shown any real interest in my work, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were changing. But it was my father's message that stood out the most. Robert, you're always welcome to visit the family home if you ever want to work here. We'd love to see you more, Victoria. His words were tentative, but the invitation was there. Robert, who had once been so determined to get me on his proper career path, was now offering an olive branch. And that, more than anything, made me feel like this moment, this change, was real. I sat back in my chair, the weight of everything I had just shared with my family settling in. I wasn't just some distant relative to them anymore. I wasn't the failure or the one they had to pity. They were seeing me for who I really was, and I felt free. The photographer, who had been quietly observing the dynamic unfold, gave me a knowing smile. "You look different," he said, adjusting the camera, "like you've shed something heavy." I nodded slowly. Maybe I have. As the interview with Forbes wrapped up, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. I'd spent so many years feeling invisible to my family, hiding my success from them so they wouldn't feel threatened by it. But now, as the light from the photographer's camera flashed around me, I finally felt like I was standing in my own truth. And just when I thought the day couldn't get any more surreal, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my father. "Robert, I'd really like to see you, Vic. You know where we are. Come visit anytime." I read it twice. His words weren't loaded with expectations, with the pressure to follow the family business. It was just an invitation, an open door, not as a father to a daughter he wanted to mold, but as a father to a daughter he was starting to respect. The realization hit me then. This wasn't just about my success anymore. It wasn't just about proving I was capable. My family was finally starting to understand who I was, and that felt like a bigger victory than anything else. As the photographer packed up his gear and Jennifer wrapped up the interview, I sat quietly for a moment. I could hear the hum of the city outside my window, the soft buzz of messages on my phone, and yet it all felt still. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anything. I had already found it. My success wasn't just the business, the billion-dollar company, the Forbes feature. It was this moment, sitting here in my modest apartment, knowing that the family I had always longed to understand me was beginning to do so. Not because of what I had, but because of who I had become. The next step, I realized, was not just to prove myself to them. It was to let them in, to teach them what I had learned, to show them that success didn't always have to be the same thing for everyone. I sent a quick reply to Marcus and Claire, letting them know I'd be happy to share more about my work. And to my father, I simply typed, "Victoria, I'll come by this weekend. Let's have that dinner." As I hit send, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I knew there would still be challenges ahead. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking my own path, not because I was fighting against the world, but because I was finally stepping into it, fully and authentically. This was the start of something new, not just for my career, but for my relationship with my family. It was the beginning of a future where I could define success on my own terms, and I was ready for it. The light in my small apartment felt different that evening, softer, warmer, as if the weight of years of misunderstanding had begun to lift. Jennifer from Forbes and the photographer were wrapping up their final shots of me at my kitchen table, capturing the contrast between my humble surroundings and the groundbreaking company I had built. I couldn't help but smile at the irony of it all. As Jennifer adjusted the camera for one last shot, she glanced over at me and raised an eyebrow. "I can't help but notice the contrast," she said, her tone light but curious. "A billionaire running a multi-billion-dollar tech company from a modest apartment? You don't exactly fit the typical mold of a tech mogul." I shrugged slightly, the corners of my lips lifting in a wry smile. "I don't need flashy things to feel successful. I've worked hard for what I have, and that's what matters most to me. It's about the work, not the image." She nodded thoughtfully, clearly intrigued. "It must be a challenge, though, balancing such a massive business while working from a space like this. What's a typical day for you?" I leaned back in my chair, allowing the question to sink in. A typical day. I thought about it for a moment, the routine I had built out of necessity and passion. Well, I start early, usually by 6 a.m. I dive into data analysis, reviewing the performance of our AI algorithms. After that, meetings with my team across different time zones. We have contracts with some major financial institutions, and those require a lot of attention. By the evening, I might wrap up a few strategic decisions, work on product development, or mentor my team. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "That's impressive, and you've managed all of this from a space like this? With all that you've accomplished, why not upgrade?" I could feel her genuine curiosity now, no longer the casual inquiry from a journalist. She was truly interested in the why behind my choices. I've never needed more than what's essential. This apartment keeps me grounded. I don't want my success to define me in a superficial way. The work is my priority, not appearances. I paused, realizing I was saying this for myself as much as I was saying it to her. When you've been underestimated as much as I have, you stop looking for approval from anyone. You do what's right for you. The photographer, who had been adjusting his lens, looked up and smiled knowingly. "Sounds like you're in it for the long haul," he remarked. I smiled back. "I'm just getting started." As they wrapped up, Jennifer mentioned something about sending me the final edit soon, but I couldn't shake the strange satisfaction I felt, not just from the Forbes feature, but from the peace I was finally beginning to feel. The peace of knowing that I had built something real, on my own terms. Just as I was reflecting on how far I'd come, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down at the screen. It was a text from Marcus. "Marcus, I've been reading more about your company. This is amazing, Vic. How did I not know about all this?" The words hit me differently than they would have a year ago. Marcus had always been the picture of success in our family, with his well-defined path and his perfect life at Dad's firm. To see him genuinely impressed by my work, asking questions about it, it felt like a real shift. My phone buzzed again, this time from Claire. "Claire, I've been doing some reading on AI. I want to learn more about what you're doing. Can you explain it to me sometime?" Her message was almost apologetic, and it hit me in a way that left me momentarily speechless. Claire, the sister who had been so dismissive of my choices, now wanted to understand them. I had spent years trying to prove myself to her, and now, for the first time, I felt like she was finally listening. I replied quickly to both of them, offering to talk through my work when we had the time. But then, my phone buzzed again. I looked down, expecting another message from family, but instead, it was from my father. "Robert, I think I need to learn more about what you're doing, Vic. You're welcome at the family home anytime. We'd love to talk more about your work." I sat back in my chair, staring at the message for a long moment. My father, the man who had spent so much of my life pushing me toward a conventional career, was now genuinely interested in my work. It wasn't just about me visiting anymore. It was about him wanting to understand what I had built. A strange, bittersweet sense of closure began to wash over me. I wasn't doing this for approval anymore, but it felt good to finally get it. To be seen not as the rebellious daughter or the disappointment, but as someone who had built something meaningful, on her own. As the final shot of the interview wrapped up, I felt a flicker of hope that this wasn't just a one-time shift. This could be the start of something more. A real, healthy relationship with my family, one based on respect and understanding, not expectations and judgments. I looked out my window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. This was a turning point for me, and as I sat there, reflecting on how far I had come, I knew it wasn't just about the company or the money anymore. It was about taking control of my life, my identity, and my future. And now, for the first time, my family was beginning to see me for who I truly was. It was time to move forward, not just in my career, but in how I related to the people closest to me. I wasn't prepared for how quickly things had changed. A few weeks ago, I was the family disappointment, the one who dropped out of law school, rejected my father's offer, and worked from home in a mysterious job that no one really understood. But now, I was the youngest self-made billionaire, a tech entrepreneur, and someone my family was suddenly interested in. It was strange, in a way, how quickly the tides had shifted. My family, who had once believed that success could only come from a conventional path, was now opening up to new possibilities. And the most surreal part? They were starting to reach out to me, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity and respect. My phone buzzed as I sat back, reflecting on the transformation that had taken place over the past few weeks. It was a text from my mother, who had been more hesitant than anyone to accept my unconventional journey. "Patricia, hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. We may not have understood your path, but we do now. Would you like to join us for dinner this weekend?" I stared at the message for a long moment. My mother had always been a soft presence in my life, but to see her acknowledge the hard work I'd put into my business, it felt like a breakthrough. I hadn't expected an apology, and I didn't need one. But this felt genuine. I typed my reply quickly, feeling a warmth in my chest. "Victoria, I'd love to. I think it's time we have that dinner." I pressed send, and then my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my father. "Robert, whenever you want to visit, the door is open. I've been thinking a lot about what we've talked about. We're proud of you, Vic." The words felt like a healing balm. For so long, I had been the black sheep, the one who couldn't get it right, the one who never measured up to the family's expectations. But now, my father, the one who had always been so hard on me, was admitting he had been wrong. He was proud of me, not because of the company or the money, but because of the person I had become. I sat back in my chair, staring at the text, and for a moment, it all hit me. The distance I had traveled, not just physically, but emotionally. From that moment in my childhood home, where my family had tried to bend me into their mold. I looked out the window at the city skyline, reflecting on the conversation with Jennifer earlier. The photographer had caught the contrast, my billion-dollar company juxtaposed against the backdrop of my modest apartment, and I realized that the disparity didn't bother me. It never had. What mattered was that I had built something meaningful. I wasn't defined by where I lived or what I drove. I was defined by the work I did, the impact I made. I had spent years feeling like I didn't belong, like I was playing catch-up in a race that was never mine to begin with. But now, for the first time, I was fully in control of my journey. And my family? They were finally seeing me, not as the failure they once believed I was, but as someone who had charted her own course and succeeded. Just then, another text came through, this time from Marcus. Marcus, I've been looking at your company's contracts and growth projections. This is huge, Vic. I didn't know this was what you were working on. It's incredible. I want to learn more. His words, so sincere, sent a ripple of pride through me. Marcus had always been the golden boy, the one who followed the rules, made the right choices. But now, here he was, acknowledging my success and wanting to learn more. It felt like a small victory, not just for me, but for us as siblings. Maybe we'd been living in different worlds, but now at least, we were speaking the same language. And Claire? She hadn't been silent either. Claire, I'm actually starting to look into AI. I think I want to get into it. Can you recommend some resources? I smiled at the message. Claire had always dismissed my work as something irrelevant, something too far out there for someone like her. But now she was curious. She was willing to listen. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect it to be, but something had shifted. A few weeks ago, I would have never imagined my family reaching out to me like this. Now, they were seeing me in a new light. And more than that, they were showing up, not just for my company, but for me. I sent quick replies to both Marcus and Claire, promising to share my resources and set up a time to chat more. But then I paused, reflecting on what had just happened. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call. It was from my mother. I smiled before answering. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart, she said warmly, her voice soft but strong. I was thinking about what we talked about, and I realized I never really understood what you were doing. But I see it now. I'm so proud of you, Vic. I'm proud of me too, I said quietly, the words carrying more weight than I expected. I've worked hard for this, and it feels good to finally have it be seen. Do you think we could start fresh? No more misunderstandings. Just family, as we are now, she said, the sincerity in her voice clear. I think we can, I replied, my heart swelling. I'd like that. We talked for a while longer, setting the plans for dinner. But as I hung up, I realized something. My family wasn't just offering me a chance at reconciliation, they were offering me something even more valuable, a new beginning. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it would be real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. I looked at the window again, the world outside full of possibilities. I had fought to get here, and now it felt like I was finally on the right path, not just professionally, but personally too. This was the beginning of a new chapter. The Forbes magazine issue with my face on the cover hit the stands. The title on the cover, bold and undeniable, Victoria Harper, the youngest self-made billionaire, was a surreal sight, one I had never imagined for myself. It wasn't just about the recognition. It wasn't about the billions in contracts or the massive company I had built. It was the full circle moment I had long dreamed of. The moment when everything I had worked for, all the hours of doubt, hard decisions, and risks, were no longer invisible. They were real, validated by the world. I sat at my desk, looking at my phone as notifications flooded in, texts, emails, and calls. Investors were reaching out, clients wanted to know more, and journalists were eager to discuss my next move. The world now knew who I was and what I had done, and yet it was my family's shift that held more weight than anything. Marcus had called earlier that morning. I still can't wrap my head around it, he had said, his voice both amazed and apologetic. I miss so much. I wish I'd taken the time to see what you were doing. Claire had sent me a long message, admitting that she had underestimated the scale of my work. I'm proud of you, Vic. I want to learn more about AI. Can you help me get started? It was a small step, but for Claire, it was huge. She had always dismissed my work as too far removed from her world. Now, her words were filled with respect and genuine interest. And then there was Robert, my father. The text from him had come through just after I hung up with Marcus. Robert, we see it now, Victoria. We're proud of you, more than you know. Let's talk soon. It was short, but it carried so much meaning. The man who had once looked at me as a failure, as the rebellious child, was now telling me he was proud, not of the company or the money, but of me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen by him, not through the lens of his expectations, but as an equal, as a peer. I paused, putting my phone down for a moment. I looked around the office, the modest space that had become my creative hub, and thought about how far I had come. Quantum Dynamics wasn't just a company, it was my proof that success wasn't about fitting in. It was about standing firm in what you believed in, no matter how unconventional. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Forbes confirming the final details for the feature. Jennifer Walsh's voice was warm as always, but today there was an added note of admiration in it. Victoria, we're getting such a positive response from the piece. I think it's going to be one of our biggest hits. It felt surreal, but for all the external validation, I knew that the real victory wasn't the recognition, but the internal peace I had found. The world had seen me for who I truly was, and now even my family, who had once dismissed me, was starting to see the full picture. I had always wanted my family to see me, not as the disappointment, but as someone capable of greatness. Today, I was no longer the black sheep. I was the innovator they had once failed to understand, and I had earned their respect. As the interview wrapped up, the photographer packed away his gear. Jennifer gave me a final nod of approval before she left. We're excited for the world to see the full story, Victoria, she said. You've really made an impact. The realization settled in deeper now. I had made my mark, not just on the business world, but on my family's view of success. It wasn't just about the money or the accolades, it was about living life authentically, on my own terms, and having the courage to keep pushing when no one believed in me. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, I picked up the phone again, this time to call my mother. It was time to let her know I would be joining them for dinner. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice steady but full of warmth. I'll be there this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. She laughed softly, the sound like music in my ears. We'll be waiting for you? I can't wait to see you, Vic. I'm so proud of everything you've done. I paused, taking in the words. Thanks, Mom. I think we're all starting to see each other a little more clearly. As I hung up the phone, I looked out the window one more time. The world seemed different now. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt at peace with where I was headed. I wasn't just a businesswoman, I was a daughter, a sister, and a person who had finally found her place in the world. It had taken years, but I had arrived. And now, with my family by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath, the weight of everything finally settling. This was just the beginning, and I was more than ready to continue.